So, uh, welcome to the first ever chat on the Authentic Mission YouTube page. And today we have with us a Canadian, well known for speaking for medical use and responsible use of cannabis. And he wrote a great book on the history of cannabis. And so we're going to speak with him today. And your name would be Dana. Oh, okay, cool. Um, so Dana, do you want to, for anybody that's listening to the video, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and possibly why you got into being an advocate for cannabis? Mm-hmm. One second, Dana. I'm gonna have to pause for a sec. Sorry.
Well, I've been working as an activist to legalize marijuana and end the war on drugs pretty much my entire adult life. As a student, I started a club on my university campus, and we bring in speakers and promote ending prohibition there. And I've worked in many ways as an editor of Cannabis Culture magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I helped start it's called the Vancouver Seed Bank. I launched Vancouver's third medical cannabis dispensary in 2008 and really helped shepherd the dispensary movement, which has now got hundreds of places across Canada. And today, many of them are actually being raised in Toronto. But it's something I've worked on for many years. I think that ending the war on marijuana and marijuana users is very important and one of the great social issues of our time. And for me, it's about cannabis, but it's also about the whole war on drugs, which I would call a war on plants. And I think it's time for us to move beyond the war on drugs and prohibition and find better ways of dealing with all these substances. We should begin with cannabis, which is beneficial and in fact the world's greatest plants. And really, it's long overdue to end this war on cannabis.
Well, do you what? I'm gonna add a follow-up question just because I'm curious. What made you take on this cause? Was it seeing friends get arrested? Was it did you like to smoke up maybe in grade 12 and you just didn't see what the big deal was, or?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because after being involved in this for so long, I've seen that for a lot of people, they normally get involved and become a real activist for one of two reasons. Either they or someone they love needs marijuana medically to have a good life and for their health, or they or someone they love got busted and punished for marijuana and it made them angry and want to change things. But for me, it wasn't actually either of those things. I enjoyed smoking pot. Like you said, in grade 12, I started using cannabis. And the more I looked at it, the more I saw how ridiculous prohibition was. I wanted to change this. And I started writing letters to members of parliament in grade 12 and early university, and I did a book of their answers. And so I started that club on campus. And after I graduated, I met Mark Emery and started working with him in Canada on Cannabis Culture magazine. It just became a career for me. But I don't regret it one bit. I'm very happy with the progress we've made. I think it's an important issue. And for me, I guess, I feel like I've had a privileged life. I had a great childhood. I've got good parents, good family, good, and I just think it's important to give back. And I love cannabis. And I really enjoy it. And I want to give back to this plant and to others who enjoy it and want to have the opportunity to use it. So I guess that's how I ended up on the path. One thing I really liked about being a cannabis activist for me is it's given me the chance to do so many different things in my life. So I've been able to help start political parties. I've been able to run as a candidate to the marijuana party at the NDP, and been able to start several businesses and write different books and have a wide range of different kind of activities that I've been able to do, all with this broader goal of ending prohibition. For someone like me, that's really been quite wonderful to have all these different opportunities to do different things, all kind of centered around one main focus of ending prohibition and legalizing marijuana.
Yes. That leads me to my one of my next questions. I'm not necessarily doing this in order, but uh, I. What about some? You must have had some people. I've noticed since I've been online myself and being an advocate. Sometimes I get feedback with people saying that I'm saying the stuff I say just to get attention, or I'm looking for my 15 minutes of internet fame. You must have gotten a fair bit of that from day one, right? Or
Well, there's
no?
nothing wrong with seeking attention, but it's what you want to use that attention for. I mean, we need to be in the media because that's the communal discussion place where these things happen. And so, but
Mm,
talking to reporters and being in the media is not easy or fun. It's quite challenging and difficult. You've got to be on point. You've got to look appropriate. You've got to say the right thing. And
yeah,
certainly, media journalists sometimes will twist your words or take you out of context.
yeah,
Especially earlier on, I saw this a lot in Canada where they would misquote you or take things out of context and make you look dumb.
yeah,
And so you don't get paid to be in the news. You don't get paid to be in the media. It's just you got to look good and speak good because if
yeah.
you're dumb, everyone comes after you. So I applaud people that are willing to go on the news and in the media and become a spokesperson for this. But I mean, for me, being in the media, it's because I've been doing this for 20 years and I've launched, several pretty major campaigns in British Columbia and in Canada to help change this. That I now am one of a half dozen people that get a phone call when something marijuana related goes down in Canada. I'm one of the go-to people, but getting attention isn't always helpful, and often in the cannabis world, getting attention brings you more scrutiny and makes you more likely to get raided and more likely to get arrested because you're out there and you're in the public and you're drawing attention that way. But I try to ignore the haters or anybody
Mm,
that has negative things to say. I would rather focus on ending the war on cannabis, dealing with the laws and the situation, than
yeah.
arguing with other cannabis users about the strategy and tactics.
Mm. You're cutting out just a little bit. It was coming in great though. I just lost you for 2 seconds though. Can you hear me?
Anybody that is against me, especially other cannabis users who might disagree on tactics and strategy or personalities or whatever. But I try to focus on the main goal, which is ending prohibition,
Yeah,
ending the war on cannabis users. It's because we smoke pot or believe it should be legal doesn't mean we're all going to get along or all have similar beliefs about other things. But I really try to avoid fighting other activists or other cannabis
mm,
people and just try to find ways to work together when we can and not to work against each other when we can work together.
exactly. Um, so if you were in charge of the file right now with the Liberal government, right? What would you like if it was completely up to you, what would you like to see? Because we're not, just to be clear for anybody that's listening, the average advocate for cannabis use isn't saying let 10-year-olds smoke, let anybody run around and sell all the dope they want. That's not necessarily what we're saying, right? But
Well,
ideally,
I'll tell
what?
you what I would do if I was in charge would open things up quite a bit. I mean, I think that legalization has to mean that farmers are able to grow high quality cannabis products by the thousands of hectares.
Mm-hmm,
And if you see a situation like that, the price goes very low, cannabis becomes more accessible to people. But I don't think legalization is going to mean more people are smoking joints necessarily. I think that real legalization will bring in a lot of other products, vaporizing, edibles, capsules, tinctures, drops, creams. But I
mm-hmm,
think more mainstream people who aren't cannabis users now might end up using. Because smoking pot, I mean, I love smoking joints, obviously, but a lot of people
yeah,
don't want to smell like marijuana. Even when it's legal, they're not going to want to smoke around their kids. They can't smoke at work. They can't. So I think that legalization really means we need a lot of other cannabis products out there. But I
mm-hmm,
think if I was in charge, I would treat cannabis like other plants. I would let everybody grow cannabis if they choose to. But I think most people wouldn't bother because people grow their own tomatoes. Most people prefer to buy them in the store. But
Good
I
point.
think cannabis needs to be a lot cheaper than it is. I think that the price we pay now, $5 to $10 a gram for this plant, that
Yeah.
is way too high. And under
Yeah.
legalization, any real legalization will mean cannabis is a lot cheaper. And if farmers can grow it, they're not going to get perfectly manicured buds when they're growing it by the hectare,
Yeah.
but they're going to get extract quality products that they can make pure extracts out of for pennies, very, very cheap. And so, right now in Canada, we grow a lot of hemp, and the hemp farmers have to destroy all the resin that their hemp plants produce. But if they could keep that, that's very rich in CBD, and they produce a lot of resin, which they could sell for a very low price and provide CBD medicine for a lot of people right now. So the legalization I would like to see would be cannabis like other plants who can grow it if they want. The price is a lot lower. But if you want to buy a cannabis product in the store, a psychoactive cannabis product in the store, there should be an age limit on that. I would actually say 16 years could be an age limit, which is what the Canada Senate recommended when they put out a big, massive report on cannabis in 2005, and they recommended that it be a 16-year age limit. But I think the main thing is that people shouldn't be going to jail for growing cannabis, for using cannabis, for buying cannabis, or for selling cannabis. And even if you're selling it outside of the regulatory system, that should either be against the rules, but it shouldn't be like a mandatory jail.
Maybe like
if somebody's brewing beer in their basement, that's allowed. And if they sell that product, that's against the rules, but they don't go to jail for 10 years or whatever. They get a fine or they might get punished in some way. And so we need rules that really treat cannabis, I think, more like how we treat beer and even tobacco, and that you can grow your own, you can brew your own, you can share it with your friends without profit, and that's fully allowed. But if you want to sell it in a store, there's got to be rules around it in terms of quality control, in terms of proper labeling and age limits and things like that. Yeah. So the only real rules that we need are around the product that's sold in a store and quality control and things like that. But we don't need a big monopoly. We don't need to treat cannabis like plutonium, and we really need to let people grow their own if they choose.
Very, very good points. Very good points. The next question I have is for anybody that's listening again or watching this video, however you want to look at it. What is your tour that you were going, like your tour that you're doing right now? Or I'm sorry, did you just wrap it up actually?
Well, I'm done my tour. I'm doing something called Overgrow Canada. And what happened is I got my hands on a very large quantity of seeds for cannabis for a strain that Canadian hemp farmers grow to produce seeds. And so I've got millions of seeds of a cannabis strain that'll grow a 5-foot tall plant, male and females. And the females will have a large central bud, a big hole in the middle, of minimal side branching. Yeah. And when hemp farmers grow it, they leave the male plants there, and the females get seeded by the pollen, and they produce a large quantity of seed. But if you grow this plant unseeded and get rid of the males, it'll produce a decent level of CBD. You can use it for kind of purposes, but really, I've given away over 2 million seeds now. I traveled to 16 cities across Canada, and by mail order, we've distributed a lot of seeds. And the goal of this campaign is for Canadians to plant cannabis openly in their communities, to sprout the seeds, grow them on their own property, and to grow them in parks and traffic circles and public planters and anywhere a plant can grow openly, to plant cannabis there. Yeah. And the idea behind that is not so much to get a whole bunch of marijuana buds, but to normalize cannabis growing. If there's 2 million plants in Canada that are growing all over every major city and in public everywhere, and everyone's growing cannabis, it becomes normalized. It becomes hard for the police to enforce. My dream would be that when you're walking down the street and you see a cannabis plant growing on someone's lawn or in a public planter or whatever, you go, that's a nice plant. It's the 10th one I've seen today. Isn't it lovely? And then you just walk on. Not like now where you see a cannabis plant growing openly. You're like, oh my God, that's cannabis. How did that get there? Who's growing that? We got to call the police. What's happening, right? Like, it should just be like a normal thing. And so I went to 16 cities, and I gave a talk about the history of cannabis in Canada, and I gave away seeds to everyone who came. At my second stop in the city of Calgary, I got arrested. They actually arrested one of our volunteers at the event who went back to the van to get some more seeds. A whole bunch of police showed up in Calgary. It was the only stop where any cops showed up. But in Calgary, a bunch of police came. We kept doing what we were doing. They didn't interfere. We had over 200 people there listening to the talk and getting seeds. The police didn't interfere. But one of our volunteers went to our van to get more seeds, and because he was alone, he was with our van, the police grabbed him and arrested him. And so I went out to the police and talked to them and said, look, it's my event. I'm the one giving away seeds. You can't arrest other people at my event. Yeah. And ended up sort of making the police arrest me. I gave away cannabis seeds right in front of them and said, look, you can't be arresting volunteers here. And the upshot of it is that I ended up getting charged with trafficking in cannabis seeds. The volunteer who was arrested was released without charges. And I've been back to Calgary to face the first hearing of many. But they're actually seeking a mandatory minimum of 6 months in jail for me in Canada for giving away these seeds. But it's a bizarre situation because although cannabis seeds are covered under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and is considered marijuana, the fact is you can buy cannabis seeds like marijuana seeds all across Canada in dozens and dozens of shops. In Calgary, where I'm arrested, there's 2 shops that sell cannabis seeds.
Yeah.
And so it's a bizarre situation. I'm basically charged.
Just one sec. I'm kind of I can hear you, but I'm just letting you know I'm losing you again. But that's the joys of technology. It's cutting in and cutting out once in a while, but it got a lot better since the beginning. So I'll give it a second there to catch up maybe, and then I'll ask you the next question unless you got a follow up.
No, that's fine. I can repeat myself.
Okay. Yeah, I'll ask you to just I caught right when you were talking about the end and about like the court and how you just started going to the proceedings and the mandatory minimum sentence. I caught that. Then it gradually faded out.
Well, I'll just say Calgary was the only city where the police showed up. I kept on giving away seeds after my arrest. My bail conditions actually are such that I can't possess seeds or cannabis except when I'm at work, because I run medical marijuana dispensaries in Vancouver, and my lawyer, Kurt Chusaw, convinced the Justice of the Peace that I need to be able to run my dispensaries. But the way it's phrased, being at work, I'm at work all the time. This is my life's work, like, so I'm hoping that I can look at it that way.
Yeah, technically then, just to make it clear, this, because you're an advocate, me and you doing this interview right now would be considered work in a sense, no?
That's how I see it anyways. Yeah, we'll see if the Justice of the Peace agrees if anything comes up. But as it stands, we've given away over 2 million seeds. People are sending me photos of their plants sprouting and growing, and many people got 100 seeds, and the idea is for them to plant them all around their town. So I'm really hoping that this summer and fall we see, hundreds of thousands of cannabis plants sprouting up all across Canada. That would be a real dream come true for me.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about stuff, and I think you're right. And it doesn't just come with cannabis. We gotta normalize a lot of things in society to take away the power from the media. Whether it's cannabis or whether it's I did a video on everybody being shocked about Kim Kardashian and all her selfies she does. Well, that's only because you're making the human body something sexual when it's just the human body, quite frankly. So I'm just saying we gotta, aside from cannabis, there's a lot of other things that people gotta get over and just normalize, and you know what I mean,
Well, in our society in North America, over the last several decades, has changed a lot. I mean, the perception of gay rights and gay people has changed drastically over the last generation. Racial perceptions have changed hugely. America used to have apartheid up until fairly recently, until the 50s. They had black and whites were separated in all kinds of ways, and we're still struggling through these issues.
Yeah.
And the war on drugs and the war on cannabis is really part of all that. But what makes it different is that there's a huge apparatus of police and courts and prosecutors and jails that feeds off of cannabis prohibition in a way that it didn't off of some of these other kind of social change issues.
Yeah.
And so it makes it much harder to change these things. And because drug use and cannabis use is seen more as a choice, whereas being gay or the color of your skin is not so much a choice, that also makes it harder for us as well. But there's certainly a lot of parallels between all these issues, and the arguments they use against us and the ways they demonize us are very similar. You know, they used to say that it was gay people were after our kids and they want to turn our kids gay, and you know, we got to keep gay people away from being scout leaders or teachers or things like that because they'll be bad for kids. Yeah. And now we have the exact same thing about cannabis users, that we're somehow after people's kids, and it's all about the children and protecting children from cannabis users. And it's the same kind of fear tactics and demonization that we see on these issues. And so I see these things are all connected, and this is part of a big social change that has been going on for decades.
Yep.
And ending the war on drugs, I think, is probably one of the final parts of that social change towards acceptance and diversity and tolerance and the things that we really value now in our society, of accepting people that are different, and people have the right to make their own choices about their own body, whether it's their sexuality, whether it's their religion, whether it's their diet, whatever these people believe.
Yeah.
They have the right to control their own body. And cannabis users and drug users and that really need to be the next step in that social change.
Now, the one thing I wanted to ask you is, has even in all your activism, have you ever had, aside from the people that may have been haters, and said, like, back off, you're just doing this for attention, have you had people that are on your side but maybe have told you, like, let's die down for a bit? Like when Steve Emery got arrested, did that kind of scare you a bit, or is he, as far as you know, is he planning to just get right back on the horse when he comes home?
Oh, well, you mean Mark Emery, and Mark's a good friend of mine.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Mark's a very good friend of mine, and I was with him. I mean, when he came to Vancouver and started his cannabis crusade in the mid-'90s, I started working with him pretty soon after that, and we worked very closely together over the years. And often when he would get arrested and go to jail, which he did many times, especially for his longer times, like when he was in Saskatoon for 2 months, and then when he was in jail in the U.S. for 4.5 years, I tried to work sort of on the outside. I organized vigils and an awareness and tried to sort of help him in that way. But no, activism, sometimes things on waves and you have a certain crusade that's happening and that, but really the civil disobedience campaign that Mark started, when we launched this big campaign 20 plus years ago, you couldn't buy a bong or a pipe in Canada. Grow books and High Times magazine were still banned and not available. You couldn't get seeds. There was no dispensaries. And all these things have come through an extensive civil disobedience campaign that started with bongs and pipes, and Mark Emery was really the leader of that part of things, helping others to open up head shops. And just like now in Canada, where dispensaries are being raided, 20 years ago, it was bong shops that were getting raided and shut down. And they would reopen, and we'd have all these challenges. And now we move forward with seed banks, and Mark paid the price for selling seeds to Americans, but seed banks are now very common in Canada.
Yeah.
And then dispensaries, we started opening up those, and that's been the next move. And then I've been giving away cannabis seeds, which to me is the final, or part of that final thing. If we can buy paraphernalia, we can get information on cannabis, we can buy medical or personal cannabis, and then we can grow it ourselves with free seeds. That's kind of everything we want. Okay. But I definitely have always supported civil disobedience, and I've always had people in the cannabis movement who have opposed that or had different strategies. But in my opinion, civil disobedience has been the number one most successful tactic that we've had. And we live in a country where it can be effective because of our Charter of Rights, because of public opinion, because of the way things work here. The cannabis civil disobedience campaign has been remarkably successful. And so, no, I've never really listened to people that say hold off or hold back or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's interesting over the years when I first started getting cannabis movement, there was people who were in the hemp movement who were like, we should not push the marijuana thing so much because hemp can save the planet. If we can just legalize hemp and grow more hemp, then we don't, the marijuana thing scaring everybody. So they tried to separate those things out. And then there was medical marijuana and this idea that we got to push medical marijuana first and not have recreational or personal marijuana be the thing holding back patients from getting their medicine. But to me, it's all a push forward. It's all in the same direction. The ultimate goal is to have cannabis be free like other plants. Mm-hmm. And the first step of that is to, free the low THC varieties. Then we free the people that need it for medical use. And each of these steps that liberates part of the whole, to me, is very positive and a move forward. So I'm all about incremental change. I'm all about continued pressure and civil disobedience. Mm-hmm. And, there's many strategies to get to the end, but so far, civil disobedience and winning in the courts from your civil disobedience has by far been the most successful thing for us in Canada.
Well, I will admit, like, from day one when I was introduced to you through CTV News Channel, and when I saw you wrote a book and you mailed it for any viewers that are listening or watching this, and you mailed out grams of cannabis to different MPs. I was like, wow, that guy's got, he's got a lot of mojo behind him, or you know what I mean? He's got balls, plain and simple.
That was a fun little campaign, yeah. And I've actually sent pot to politicians before. Yeah. I sent a half ounce of Purple Kush to BC Premier Christy Clark about a year ago or so. We had a teacher strike going on. All the teachers in the province were on strike, and they were negotiating. So I sent her the pot, partly to remind her that if we legalized it in BC, we would then have more than enough money to pay our teachers what they deserve and not have to have these strikes. Mm-hmm. And I also said that if she smoked it if the negotiators smoked some together, maybe they could come to a better agreement. And sure enough, about a week after I sent it, they hammered out a final agreement and they ended the strike. So I'm taking full credit for that.
So you think in secret they smoked?
Well, probably not, but I mean, I'm being funny. But who knows? They refused to say what they did with the cannabis or anything, and they were a bit weird about it. So maybe they did. I like to think they did, and until they conclusively deny it, that's my story. Mm-hmm. But then, I wrote a book about the history of cannabis in Canada. It's a beautifully, fully illustrated book. You can see it at cannabishistory.ca. And because we're moving towards legalization in Canada, I sent a copy of my book and a gram of marijuana to all of the Liberal MPs, our new government, Justin Trudeau's Liberals, who are promised to legalize. I said, well, if they're going to legalize it, they should learn the history and see where we've come from and know the story of it. Mm-hmm. And it got a varied response. Some of the MPs thought it was great, and I made a few new friends in the government. Other MPs freaked out and called the police and gave the police my book and the gram of pot. One MP on Prince Edward Island, which is right across the country, he said that the book and the gram sat unopened in his office over the weekend, and when he came in on Monday, he said a wall of pungent aroma hit him as he walked in his office. And I thought, wow, what a testament to the potency of the weed that I sent him, that 1 gram was able to stink up his office so strongly like that. But it was a fun thing, and to me it was just trying to show how ridiculous it is and how silly it is that they all get worked up over a gram of pot. And admittedly, it was a publicity campaign for my book to get my book in the news a little bit, and I think it worked well in both regards. But I like sending pot to people. I think more Canadians should be getting free pot in the mail, and I think most people would probably like getting some free pot in the mail.
Oh yeah. Now, the next question I have would be, like, we saw the Supreme Court decision where now they're saying that cannabis users shouldn't have to automatically depend on these government allowed dispensaries, and they should be allowed to grow. Again, now I'm assuming, like, I'm wondering if you think they're going to be able to meet that deadline that they were given, and I'm wondering if you think that they are going to stick to the deadline for full legalization that they said they were going to start, I believe it's next spring, correct?
Yeah, well, those are two separate things. But here's the deal. So the court case that we just won recently, the Allard decision, gave the government about 6 months to reintroduce the program, which the conservatives had tried to kill, to allow patients to grow their own cannabis. And so for the last couple of years, we've been in this sort of frozen situation where if you had gotten a permit to grow your own medical marijuana or to grow for a patient who needs it, you could keep doing that, but you couldn't change anything. You couldn't get a new address. You couldn't get a new permit to grow. It was all frozen. And now the government's going to reintroduce this. And I think that's going to be huge because there's going to be tens of thousands of Canadians who will be applying to grow their own medical cannabis once the system's opened up again. And that's going to be a real game changer all across Canada. And when patients can grow their own or get somebody who's skilled to grow it for them, it really reduces their need to go to a dispensary or to buy from an LP and gives a lot more choice and quality out there. It opens things up. So I'm hoping the Liberals do it right. The Conservatives tried to kill that program. It was unconstitutional to do so, and we beat them in the courts. And so hopefully the Liberals will reopen the program in a good way. I think they probably will. They'll just put in some kind of framework for increased regulation around how you can grow cannabis at home, and probably have some kind of scrutiny or license inspector or something like that to make sure that people are growing their cannabis at home safely and responsibly and that kind of thing. But we'll see what happens. I don't really know what they're going to do, right? But they do have a time limit. If they don't do it properly, the courts is not going to look kindly upon that. So, but then the broader question of legalization and what that's going to look like and whether that will include home growing for all Canadians, I don't know. I sure hope so. The Liberals have announced they're going to be coming out with legislation to start the process of legalization next spring in 2017. Some people think it means pot's going to be legal in 2017 in the spring. That's not what they've said. They've said that they're going to start the process then. So it could be a couple more years, who knows, before this is going to work or before it's going to happen. I don't really know how long it's going to take. But for the government to license enough people to grow enough marijuana to meet the entire recreational, personal, and medical market in Canada is going to take a long time. And so if they're going to, not allow the current growers and the current system to continue, and with all the raids that we're seeing today in Toronto of dispensaries there, it looks like they're not. I think that the opportunity to buy some kind of government licensed marijuana in a store is several years away in Canada. And that's frustrating, but I think that's the reality. And I hope that between now and then they stop arresting people for possession, at least. But I don't think they're gonna. So far we're still living under Stephen Harper's mandatory minimums in Canada, and it's going to be a long wait for Justin to keep his promise of legalization.
Yeah. Well, the Conservatives, especially Ron Ambrose, is going to be on his back a little bit, but that's just my opinion. And the reason I was asking, quite frankly, maybe you would know this, maybe you covered it in your book. I will admit I haven't had a chance to read it because I have poor vision. So the reason I was asking if you think they're gonna keep their promise and legalize it, and what that might look like is because apparently, now I will admit, obviously I'm younger, so I don't know, but apparently Pierre Trudeau said in the 60s he was going to legalize it, and then he backed off.
Yeah, well, it was actually, in the late 60s and early 70s. In Canada, we were very close to legalization or decriminalization. We had this huge study called the Ledane Commission in 1971, where they talked to thousands of people and scientists and researchers and did all kinds of studies. And they recommended immediate decriminalization, meaning no arrests for personal cultivation and personal possession, and that they do a little more research before that they fully legalize it. And that was the year I was born, right, 1971. And so now we're still having the same conversation with the Trudeau as Prime Minister. But Trudeau actually promised to decriminalize, not to legalize originally, as did Joe Clark, the Conservative leader at the time as well, also promised to decriminalize. So both parties in early 1970s were saying that they were going to decriminalize and stop arresting people. So yeah, it's been a long time, and hopefully, Justin Trudeau will do what his dad said he was going to do and stop arresting people for marijuana. But the activist movement and the cannabis legalization movement is not going to wait for them to do what they promised.
Exactly.
We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep pushing with civil disobedience. And I think for a lot of Canadians who voted for Trudeau on a promise of legalization, they're getting upset. I mean, I know it's frustrating, but under Harper, our last prime minister, he was the guy who was very against marijuana and that. And I think that it becomes harder and harder for Trudeau to politically maintain the prohibition stance that he's got with the legalization stance supposed to be coming soon. By this time next year, if they're still arresting people, and then the year after that, if they're still arresting people, I think Canadians will start being like, what the hell? You said you were going to legalize it. Now we've got more arrests than ever. What's going on? There's a lot of political pressure on them to change stuff. So although it's frustrating, I don't think any of us necessarily expected Trudeau to legalize on the first day or anything. Yeah. But it's still better to have a prime minister who says he's going to legalize it than one who's working his hardest to introduce the more strict laws. Yeah. But we have a lot of concerns about what legalization is going to look like. Yeah. I've had reporters ask me, well, what are you going to do when pot's legal? Like, you're going to have to give up being an activist in a year or so. Hey, when they legalize it, you're going to be out of work. And I'm like, man, it's not like they're going to legalize it and then we're all done. The first version of legalization is going to be a crappy one. It's going to be too expensive. Yeah. People are still going to be getting treated like second-class citizens because they use cannabis. We're still going to have people losing their children and losing their jobs because they use cannabis. We're still going to have overly restrictive rules around driving and cannabis, and there's all going to be all kinds of things to deal with, and the activism and the pushing is going to continue for decades, as we move towards equality. But hopefully we can get the laws changed. That's the first and most important step.
Of course. If Trudeau doesn't do it in 3 more years or 3.5, whenever the next election's called, if he doesn't do it, would you consider running for a party again? I'm not going to name the party because maybe your views have changed on what party you.
I'm a member of the NDP, Canada's New Democratic Party.
Yeah.
It's the left wing party in Canada, and we're doing quite well recently. Before the last election, we had moved from our traditional third place federally into second place as the opposition party, and the Liberals had dropped to third, but. Many of us in the party were disappointed that the party leader didn't come out more strongly for legalization. He was very confused. Thomas Mulcair, the NDP leader, said he wanted to decriminalize, but wouldn't be specific as to what that meant, and also was negative about cannabis in many ways, and I think that was one of the many reasons he didn't end up winning the election and handed things off to Trudeau, who won it for the Liberals. But I'm still a member of the NDP. That doesn't mean I always agree with everything my party does or whatever, but the NDP is also in many provinces across Canada, and I work with the BC NDP in my province. Mm-hmm. In 4 years, if we come into the next election and people are still being arrested for marijuana possession and cultivation in Canada and it's still illegal, I hope that the NDP leader, the next leader, because our current one has just been voted out as leader, and we're going to have a new one. If the next NDP leader is not strongly in favor of legalization, I'll be very disappointed. That's got to be the stance. And if Trudeau hasn't legalized and changed the law by the next election, I fully expect my party to use that against him and to say, look, you didn't keep your promise. If you want real change, real action, we'll make that happen. Yeah. But that's still a few years away, and it's Trudeau's not even finished his first year. Yeah. It's a bit early to speculate where we're going to be 3 or 4 years from now. But if he hasn't done anything, absolutely, that'll be very disappointing. Yeah. If there's been no change at all.
Let me double check that I didn't miss any questions here, and then I'd like to ask you most of all, while I'm looking. What would you do? Sorry, what would you do? Once it does become legal, and like they said, and you're planning, and you're advocacy is not done, right? Because like you said, it's never done. Would you like go back on tour? What's your most fun way of being an advocate? Do you think?
Well, I mean, I think I'll probably continue to, be a media spokesperson for the movement, to
Yeah.
help organize events and protests. I've got more books that I'd like to write, and some books that I'm in the process of writing. So I would really enjoy getting more books and more media out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd also like to move on to other plants and other aspects of the war on drugs as well. I think that, after cannabis is legalized, whenever that's going to be, we also need to look at ending the war on mushrooms and MDMA and LSD and other psychedelics. We need to look at ending the war on all the drugs and all the plants. And that doesn't mean they're all treated like marijuana, where you'd be able to go buy some heroin at the corner store. But it means
Yeah.
that we don't treat addiction like a crime. We medicalize people who have problems with it so they can go to a doctor and get
Okay.
the drugs they need. And that we do legalize safe versions of these things. Chewing coca leaf or having access to maybe opium, or being able to take psychedelic mushrooms or ecstasy that's in a pure controlled dose so you know what you're getting. This is
Mm-hmm.
very important also. And I think we're going to see a similar kind of progression that we've seen with cannabis. And we're seeing it now where we're looking at MDMA as a medical substance, and that it's good for PTSD and for trauma, and that
Mm-hmm.
veterans and soldiers and other people who have gone through traumatic experiences get benefits from taking the substance. And when we see it as a medicine and not as just a fun thing, it changes the perception of it. And mushrooms are also medicinal plants that have a lot of psychological and spiritual benefits for people. And so this progression, I think, is going to continue. And I will continue to push, not just for the end of the war on cannabis, but for all plants. And what we call the war on drugs is really a war on the coca leaf, on the opium poppy, on the psilocybin mushroom, on the peyote plant, on the cannabis plant. And
Yeah.
all of these plants are the world's best plants with, hundreds of thousands of years of soul, spiritual, medicinal use,
Mm-hmm.
very culturally relevant, very meaningful plants that have been banned for reasons of racism, for historical reasons, of religious persecution, and as a way of subjugating the cultural and ethnic groups that use them.
Yeah.
And so that's the perspective that I like to put on this, and that's something that I will continue to do. I mean, the focus has always been on cannabis because that's the first step. It's the world's greatest plant, and it's the one that's going to help end the war on drugs. But ultimately, I
Mm-hmm.
think it's the whole thing. And so even if marijuana was legalized to my satisfaction tomorrow, and the whole war on cannabis ended, and farmers are growing thousands of hectares of high potency THC cannabis plants, I would probably then start to move on to other substances and try to advocate for ending the war on psychedelics and on other plants and continue in that vein.
Okay. So that leads me to my last question. Then it's kind of perfect that you went with that as a part of the conversation, because I heard you say something alluding to that earlier, and I just want to be clear. What do you say to people that have used the old adage of marijuana being a gateway drug, and when you say you want to begin the like ending the war on psychedelics and everything, just to be clear, you're not advocating that somebody like let's say I was 22 years old sitting in my room and had a ball of cocaine. You're not saying that I should be allowed to do that, right? Or is that what you're saying? Which, by the way, you have the right to say that.
Well, I don't think that taking a drug should be a crime for you to possess or put something in your own body.
Okay.
But I think if you want to use cocaine products or stimulants, I think there should be safe dosages available in a legally regulated way. If
Yeah.
you're a cocaine addict or a heroin addict, like somebody now who's using a lot of cocaine or heroin,
Yeah.
I think you should be able to go to a doctor and get a safe, clean dose that you can use in some kind of responsible way to help you stabilize yourself. You shouldn't have to prostitute yourself or steal or risk getting AIDS and hepatitis because you're a drug user, because you are an addict, or because you choose to use these things. But at the same time, I don't think you should be able to go to the store and buy a syringe full of heroin over the counter Like I think you should be able to buy a gram of marijuana or an ounce of marijuana over the counter.
Okay.
Should you be able to maybe access raw coca leaves? Should you be able to buy a drink that's got a small amount of cocaine in it in the same way that we sell drinks that have coffee and caffeine in them? Absolutely. And injecting caffeine and you taking pure caffeine can be very harmful to you too. But we don't use caffeine like that. We use it in a responsible way in lower dosages. And coca leaf, whole coca leaf in Bolivia, where it's part of their culture, they've been growing and using that plant for thousands and thousands of years. And they chew the coca leaf, and it's got a lot of benefits. And for us to say we're going to bomb your country, we're going to spray poison over your fields, we're going to arrest you and persecute you because our citizens like to do cocaine and buy it from you, that's the wrong way of dealing with this, right? We're going to treat drug use as a health issue, as a public safety issue. And if someone wants to use a stimulant or wants to take heroin or opium, they should be allowed to, but it should be done in a safe and responsible way. And the most harmful thing is alcohol. It's more addictive and more dangerous than other drugs are. But we don't see that because those harms are mitigated in many ways because it's legal. But if someone is smoking opium and someone else is getting wasted on alcohol, it's the alcoholic who's actually going to cause more social problems and more health problems and more difficulties. But it's prohibition that puts it into a more dangerous state. People shouldn't have to buy. Prohibition makes drugs more potent and more dangerous. So during alcohol prohibition, beer and wine weren't available, but pure bathtub gin was available. That might make you go blind or might kill you when you drink it. And in the same way, people can't get opium or coca leaf or safe versions of these drugs because of prohibition. In fact, in Vancouver, you can't even get heroin anymore. It's all fentanyl, they're saying now. And fentanyl is more strong and more dangerous, but it's easier to smuggle and easier to move around and easier to deal with under prohibition. If you could offer someone who's a heroin addict, say, hey, instead of injecting heroin, why don't you smoke opium instead? A large percentage of them would say, yes, I'd much rather do that. We would have a safer, healthier society. They'd be better off. We'd all be better off. But we force them to use it in the most dangerous and difficult way. And so and if somebody wants to inject or wants to use it in that way, they should be able to do so under some kind of medical supervision. But so that, forcing someone who's a heroin addict or a heroin user to have to steal and rob and prostitute themselves and pay a very high price for that activity doesn't benefit anybody. And I'm not sure exactly what the rules should be around all drugs in every way, but I do know that what we're doing now with the blanket ban on all things is the worst possible way to deal with psychoactive substances. And as a society, we can figure out better ways to deal with these things. It won't all be perfect. There'll always be problems. But reasonable rules and regulations will minimize the problems, minimize the harm, and maximize the benefit. And that goes for all substances, including cannabis and including every other thing people want to put into their body.
All right, that is a really fair point because in Vancouver, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if they're still there, but did they have or don't they have safe drop-in centers?
They call it a supervised injection site. And there's a couple of them now, but there's one main one that was quite controversial when it opened and is now pretty much respected by everybody for the amount of harm it's reduced and the lives it's saved. And it's basically a place where you can go in, you got a little booth for you, and they'll give you a clean needle, and there's a nurse there. And so you can bring in whatever drugs you want, and you can put them in your needle and hook up your heroin or whatever you want to inject, and inject yourself. But there's two advantages. There's few advantages. One is you're not on the street doing it. And if you have an overdose or a health problem, there's a nurse there to help you. And you're getting a clean needle, so you're not having to reuse the same needle and potentially spread disease. And that to me is a very good thing. But it's also really, I think they should also be offering you clean drugs. Why are they letting you inject your shitty street drugs there? There should be a place where you can go in and you can actually get a card that I'm a heroin addict, I need this. And you go in and they can even sell them to you at cost because these things are incredibly cheap to supply. It doesn't really cost anything except because of prohibition makes it expensive. But the idea that we give you a clean needle to inject your dirty drugs in is still better than not, but it's only one step forward. But these things are important, I think, absolutely. There's all kinds of research showing that the supervised injection site has saved a lot of lives. reduces the spread of disease. We also have a needle exchange as well, where you can get clean needles and drop off your old clean needle and get a new one. They have a van that drives around the heavy drug use area in Vancouver and exchanges them with people. And we think all these dirty drug addicts leave their needles around, but they do that because they have to, because possession of a needle is against the law, and you'll get in trouble from a police officer. So they're not allowed to carry their own personal needle around and have their own little clean syringe kit. If you get caught with that, you're in trouble. So you've got to, it forces them, for their own legal protection, to have to throw needles away, and prohibition just makes it more dangerous. But I believe the vast majority of injection drug users would stop injecting their drugs if they had a safer, better way of taking them. They would opt for that safer, better way. The vast majority of them, would quit injecting if they had a better option.
Okay, well let's end it on this quick question, and I want if you have something that you want to say to somebody that might stumble on this video on YouTube, like maybe if we're lucky, I doubt it, but if we're lucky, Justin Trudeau, or if we're lucky, somebody of prominence or whatever, what like do you consider that if you were to ask a person, like it's been said that if you ask people what they did first for drugs, they generally say marijuana. That's why people think it's a gateway drug. Do you think if they began the question with, what did you do first? Booze, marijuana, or this drug? Do you think the gateway debate would change?
Yeah, there's a few things in there. I mean, I would say that alcohol is the drug that's the real gateway to hard drug use, and that alcohol leads people to make irresponsible decisions. I know a lot of hard drug users who tell me the first time they injected was when they were drunk. And of course, alcohol makes other drugs more dangerous as well. You have a much higher chance of overdosing and having problems on other drugs if you're drinking alcohol at the same time. Cannabis is a gateway drug to normality, to good health. Cannabis is a gateway people who use other drugs often to get off those things. I know many, many people, and there's plenty of research also that shows that alcoholics and drug addicts of other substances find if they use cannabis, they can help get off those things. That cannabis can cut their cravings and bring them back to a place of normality. One of the problems we have in Canada about this idea that they want to sell legal marijuana in liquor stores is that many alcoholics who use cannabis to stay off of alcohol don't want to have to go to a liquor store to get their cannabis. And our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, I hope he watches this video, but I'd be surprised. But he's a cannabis user himself. He's admitted to smoking pot. And I know people who knew Justin Trudeau. He's done a lot more things than just smoke pot. And his mom smokes pot, and his dad smoked pot, and his brother was facing marijuana possession charges when he sadly died. And so, this idea that they're going to drag out legalization for years, or that Justin Trudeau wants the guy who sold him pot and the friends that he smoked pot with to go to jail or to be arrested still, is ludicrous. And so I hope that our politicians will do the right thing, will not stall and delay and let whoever's pressuring them not to legalize, to ignore those people and to do the right thing, because Justin Trudeau has a chance to be going down in history as the Prime Minister who legalized marijuana in Canada. Yeah. And pretty much whatever else he does, that's what he's going to be remembered for in future generations. And so if he does it right and does the right thing and doesn't delay and doesn't try to put in some kind of corporately controlled thing that is really just prohibition with a new face and a new dealer, which is the government. We need cannabis to be cheaper and more accessible. We need to be able to grow our own, and we need to start transitioning away from the whole war on drugs and the whole concept of prohibition. And what we do with cannabis will set the tone for all these other things. And so, we have a chance in Canada to make history as the first major country, the first G7 country or G20 country to legalize cannabis at the federal level like that. It's going to be huge. And what Canada does will set an example and a template for other countries around the world. And so let's do it right, and let's not voice this off on future generations. That's what I have to say.
That's great. That's great. So thank you for your time today. I'm sorry if it took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but I like letting conversations happen naturally. And I hope you have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let me plug my websites while I'm at it. People can find out more about me and my work at cannabishistory.ca. We didn't mention one of the books I wrote, Green Buds and Hash, but it's a fun Dr. Seuss parody, and you can find that at greenbudsandhash.com. And overgrowcanada.com is to find out more about my seed giveaway campaign. We don't send seeds internationally, but if you're in Canada, you can probably still get some seeds from us at overgrowcanada.com. Thanks for having me, and it was a fun conversation, and I look forward to seeing it online.
All right, thanks, buddy. Have a good
Hey,
one.
take care. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.